You may be wondering, what does a contraction even feel like? How do I know that I'm in labor? In this video, we're going to break down what is a contraction and what does it feel like, and also comparing how I feel contractions and how Roxanne feels contractions, because not all of us feel them in the exact same way. Hey, my name is Gina. I'm a perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula and the founder of MamasteFit.
And I'm Roxanne. I'm a labor and delivery nurse and student midwife and mom of 3.
And in this video, we're going to break down, what does a contraction even feel like? How do you know that you're having a contraction? So first, let's break down what is a uterine contraction.
So a contraction is just a tightening of our muscles. It happens within all of the muscles in our body, to include when you have a leg cramp. That is a contraction of your muscle. Our uterus is a muscle as well. And so when we're having uterine contractions for labor, that is a tightening of our uterine muscle, causing cervical dilation, hopefully. So a contraction is any tightening of our muscle. And so we can get them in any muscles within our body, to include when you get leg cramps. That is a contraction of your calf muscle, that usually due to dehydration. But our uterus is a muscle as well. And so when we're having uterine contractions, that is a tightening of that uterine muscle. There are different types of contractions that you might experience during pregnancy, but the most common is either Braxton Hicks or practice contractions that you might feel, or labor contractions. There is a difference between the two contractions. So Braxton Hicks is really just the middle portion of your uterus just randomly contracting. It's just all of a sudden it's really tight and then it releases randomly throughout the day. There's no pattern and it's usually not painful. Whereas active labor contractions is like a wave. There is a slow build to the contraction. It peaks and then it slowly lets off. And then there's usually some sort of pattern to that. And no matter what you do, if it's labor, it's not going to stop. It's going to just continue until obviously a baby is born. But the difference between Braxton Hicks, it's just this middle portion of your uterus. The main body portion of your uterus is contracting, but nothing is happening to the cervix down below when you're having that contraction. Whereas during a uterine contraction for active labor or a labor contraction, this is where the bottom of the uterus kind of pulls and builds to thicken the top of our uterus, which is called the fundus. And then that is what's pushing down to cause cervical dilation. And so as the cervix dilates or opens or thins out or effaces, this fundus is getting thicker and thicker as that change of the cervix is happening. So this balloon is our favorite analogy of what exactly is happening with an active labor contraction. So again, Braxton Hicks, no change with the cervix, whereas an active labor contraction where it's pulling up from the bottom and pushing from the top. There's a little ping pong ball that you can see is your baby is causing cervical dilation. So you can see that now there's a little bit of an opening. So the cervix has effaced a little bit as well as dilated. Eventually this just keeps happening and over until the baby just is born.
So with the Braxton Hicks contraction or those practice contractions, you can start experiencing them in your second trimester. And typically they're more associated with fatigue. Maybe you've been on your feet a lot, maybe you're exercising, and then also dehydration. So if you're experiencing a lot of Braxton Hicks contractions that are uncomfortable or even painful, resting and focusing on hydration could be really beneficial to decreasing the number of Braxton Hicks that you're having. In comparison, a labor contraction is going to be a more wave-like sensation. So I would describe it similar to a Charlie horse sensation, not in regards to the level of discomfort, but in regards to how it's like this change in intensity during. So when you have a Charlie horse in your calf, you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel it building. Like it starts at this low intensity, but you know it's coming. And then it peaks in intensity at the top and you're like, no. And then it releases and lets go, but you can still kind of feel it. That's how I would describe that wave-like sensation of a contraction, where you feel it coming. It's going to build in intensity. It's going to peak for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then it's going to release and to let go. So there's a change in intensity during the entire contraction. The beginning and the end are a lot lower intensity than the peak of the contraction. In comparison, a Braxton Hicks is usually a sudden onset of tightening and then a sudden release. There's not really like a build or a change in intensity during the contraction. And so this can be a really helpful way to kind of distinguish between the two of, is it a sudden onset and sudden release of a contraction, or is it a wave-like sensation where it builds, peaks, and then releases with a change in intensity throughout the contraction? If it's changing in intensity, it's probably more of a uterine contraction or a labor contraction. So for me, I feel my labor contractions initially in my lower abdomen, right around where my pubic bone is, and it almost feels like this burning, pulling sensation, as if somebody was like twisting the skin on my arm. So it's not like burning like on fire, but burning more of like a pulling or tugging sensation. So I feel it really low, and it's that wave-like sensation where I start to feel it build, it peaks in intensity, and then it releases. And then over time, I begin to feel it throughout my entire belly. So like my whole belly will start to tighten. And then as baby gets like lower in my pelvis, once I'm in more active labor, I begin to feel it more to like the sides of my hips. So kind of the sensation of my contractions changes as my labor progresses as well. So I would describe it as almost this like burning, pulling sensation, not like on fire, but it's kind of like this tugging sensation. I still think that they're painful, but it's not like the worst pain I felt in my life. And it's intermittent, so it's not like continuous. It's for like 1 minute at a time. A trick that I used during my home births was I pretended that my contractions were 10 seconds long because that's how long the peak was of the contraction. So I would feel it build. The peak is what I considered a contraction, and then the release. And so that was like a mental strategy that I used because it was just 10 seconds of really focusing on relaxing and releasing and letting go, as opposed to focusing on a whole minute. So that was my mental trick. You may or may not be able to lie to yourself, but I was capable of being in delusion. So
Denial is strong. So my labor contractions, I feel more in my back. So I do typically have more back labor during my labors than Gina does. So I will feel them initially start in my like lower back, upper glute area. It'll be like this tingling, almost like pins and needles in that lower back. And then it'll slowly, as labor progresses, kind of start to wrap around to the lower part of my belly as well as my entire belly. Again, like pins and needles kind of tightening and just like crampy kind of feeling. Initially, it's not super like noticeable. It almost feels like when your arms are starting to fall asleep, like that pins and needles portion. It's not super pleasant, but it's like all in my back and then wrapping around into my belly is when it's like tightening and a little bit more actual cramping type sensation and uncomfortable. As my labor progresses from the belly, once it's now like wrapped around, during the peak of the contraction is mostly only in my belly, whereas the rest of the contraction is all just in my back. Once the contraction is gone, it's really just like I notice it's still in my back and it's just always constantly there. Noticing like that like kind of tingling sensation, it just increases in tingles and pins and needles. And then as baby kind of like moves down more, I do feel it more on my hips, similarly to you, where I feel it like that, again, tingling pins and needles in my lower hips, kind of sides of my legs a little bit more, and then more pressure as well. I think the pressure is the part that a lot of people like don't expect. Whenever I'm like in labor, I forget about the increase in pressure as baby is descending down in the birth canal. Like I'm like, oh, I forgot that happens every time where I'm like, wow, it feels like a bowling ball is just sitting in my butt right now. And that's just from the baby descending, and it's normal, but I always forget about it.
So you may describe contractions differently in your own body, and you may experience them with different sensations as well. So be sure to comment below to let us know how you would describe your contractions and how you feel them in your body, especially as your labor progresses, because those that are watching may be able to learn from your comment as well. But the main thing that we're looking for to know that this is labor, this is a labor contraction, is the change in intensity during the contraction. So the beginning and the end of the contraction are a lot lower in intensity in comparison to the peak of the contraction, which is about 10 to 15 seconds long. But there's a distinct difference in the intensity of the contraction from the beginning, the middle, and the end, and that's how you can know that it's a labor contraction. In addition, they're going to come at a set frequency. So when you're in early labor, it may be like every 10 to 15 minutes. And so every 10 minutes, you have a contraction. 10 minutes, another one. 10 minutes, another one. As you get closer to active labor, it'll be every 2 to 3 minutes that you're having a contraction. So it's a minute of contraction, 1 or 2 minutes of rest, another contraction, 1 or 2 minutes rest, another contraction, but it's going to come at a set frequency. Braxton Hicks is sudden onset, sudden release. There's no build up to it. There's no change in intensity. And it's also random. So it might be you have one Braxton Hicks contraction and then 3 minutes later you have another Braxton Hicks, and then 20 minutes later you have another one. Usually Braxton Hicks are related to uterine irritability. So we're tired, maybe you've been out on your feet a lot, you had a really hard workout, or we're dehydrated. And so resting, maybe taking a warm bath with like some Epsom salt, and then also hydrating, especially with electrolytes, could be beneficial to decrease the Braxton Hicks, especially if they're really uncomfortable or painful. So hopefully this video is helpful for you to know, what does a contraction even feel like? How do I know that I'm in labor? Again, we all kind of feel it a little bit differently in our body, but the key thing that you're looking for is that change in intensity and it coming at a set frequency. So if you enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get notified whenever we release new videos. We release new workout videos every week and new educational videos like this every week as well. If you want more support throughout your pregnancy, join our online prenatal fitness programs and online childbirth education course. We show you how to move your body confidently throughout your pregnancy with modifications based on each trimester, pelvic stability exercises, pelvic opening, and pelvic floor release exercises. And then also our childbirth education course is going to educate you on the how. So what is going on within your body? Because it's really helpful to know what is actually happening, because birth is not this huge mysterious thing. There's a lot of science that explains what is going on. And when we understand what is happening within our body and we understand the science of birth, it really helps with our confidence navigating our birth. So you can check out all of our prenatal support courses on our website at MamasteFit.com and use code YouTube10 to get 10% off any of our online courses, both for pregnancy, postpartum, and then also professional courses.